Hello and welcome to Keto Life Support. This is Kim Howerton. How you doing? Just a little intro today because I have a request. This podcast has been, thus far, a real labor of love, and we have loved doing it, and we hope that you love listening. And to continue the podcast, we could use a little bit of help. So I have two things, actually, we need help with. The first is financial. If you get benefit from this podcast and you'd like to contribute $1 or $2 a month or more, there is a way to do that. If you go to ketolifesupport.com, there will be a Patreon link to my Patreon page, The Ketonist, where you can just give us a little tip, or you can sign up for a larger amount where you get benefit back beyond just knowing that you're a good person. And you're a good person whether you give us money or not, I promise. But if you want to keep the wheels on this particular bus, we'd love it if you could go and do that. And the second request is non-financial, which is if there's a topic you'd like to hear us talk about, whether that is from me or Ken Berry or Nisha Berry, who is coming back, by the way. Baby Barry can't talk yet, so he will not be guest starring, but maybe in the future. And, or Carrie Brown, or maybe there's somebody you'd like to hear us talk to, that's not in that list thus far. If you have topics that you want us to address on this show, tell us about it. You can do that. The best place to do it is actually on our Facebook page. Yes, we have a Facebook page. We actually have a Facebook group. It's a group, not a page. Sorry. But you can find that link again at ketolifesupport.com. And in that group, just let us know what you'd like to hear us talk about. So thank you so much for listening to my requests. And I will get this show started now. So stay tuned for the actual show. Hi, welcome to Keto Life Support, where we make your keto life sustainable, fun, and low stress. I'm Kim Howerton from theketonist.com, and I'll be coming to you weekly with some of my keto besties to bring you the practical, real-world keto advice that you need. Quick disclaimer, I am not a doctor, and even if we have a doctor in the house, he or she is not your doctor, and nothing on this show should be taken as medical advice. Always check with a trusted medical professional about your personal medical concerns. Hello and welcome to Keto Life Support. This is Kim Howerton, and I am just giving you a little intro right now because we recorded an episode with my good friend, Robert Sikes, aka KetoSavage. And by we, I mean me. I don't know why I'm speaking the plural. Anyway, so we talked about all sorts of topics that were very interesting, from reverse dieting to, what should someone's body fat be, to like, why is it different to be a fitness competitor than a regular person, all that kind of stuff. Really good chat. We talked about, do calories matter and all that kind of thing. And we dispelled the rumor that Robert is anti-protein. Anyway, so we got into a lot of different discussions, and I just want to bring this up as a topic in the intro because sometimes we can get a little dogmatic in the world, can't we? So some of you might be like, wait, Kim's talking about calories, and then, she has these other conversations where calories don't matter, and back and forth. And I just want to say, there are lots of ways to approach life, and there are lots of tools, and some work in some circumstances and some work in others. So I wanted to have this opportunity and really use this podcast to actually expand people's frameworks. And so I won't always talk about the same thing or from the same perspective all the time, nor will my guests. So if you can't roll with that, maybe skip this one. I don't know, but I think you might learn something. So I would hope that you will not. Anyway, that's pretty much what happened in this podcast. By the way, we were doing it over video, and at one point we had some technical issue, like in the last maybe 3/4 of the interview, where we lost Robert for a minute. And so just stay with me because he comes back. I'm just going to leave the whole thing in there. We were doing it live so that people were asking questions as we were going. So I chatted with them a little bit and then he came on and finished up. So I hope that doesn't disturb your peace as you're listening to this. But I think I enjoyed myself enormously on this conversation, and we can't wait to have another conversation. So hopefully you will enjoy the ride. Take care, everybody, and I will talk to you soon.
Hey guys, welcome. It is a midday live, so some of you might not be expecting this, but I got an opportunity to talk with my good friend, Robert Sikes, who some of you might know as KetoSavage. How you doing?
Hey, I'm great. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm here. Hopefully, there's construction down the street. Hopefully, the noise doesn't get too loud. But it's a sunny day in California.
Yeah, you can't beat that sunny day here in Arkansas too.
Yeah. So, excuse me. You always have to cough when you start a live just to set the mood.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because allergies they're super duper when it's sunny in California. So, tell people who you are in case they don't know.
So I am a lifetime natural competitive bodybuilder. I've been bodybuilding for, I guess, 11 years now, of which the majority of that time has been keto. I guess it's pretty close to about half and half, but all of my significant improvements have been made while in a ketogenic state. I feel like that is the best way to truly optimize one's health. And I've since taken everything that I've learned from doing ketogenic natural bodybuilding and tried to apply it to my branding, my content, my business, and just help other people benefit from it as well. Because even if you're not a bodybuilder, a lot of the same principles apply and carry over. So I feel like, you can really learn a lot about what your body responds well to when you're at a very low body fat. And I've got kind of that to lean on. And like I said, many of the principles apply to whoever you are, wherever you're at in life. So I just am excited to share that information.
Yay. So, those of you that don't know, haven't seen me interact with Robert, he's got a delightful wife, Crystal. And so they are, they're some of my favorite people. I'll just say that. They're awesome. So,
we like you too.
Good. So we have a good time together. So tell me, what are some of your basic principles about the way that you approach keto? So, obviously, like you just said, you're coming from a very specific perspective. Most of the people that are watching this are probably not planning on entering a bodybuilder kind of competition at some point. But, we all know, traditionally, right, any of us that grew up in the Arnold Schwarzenegger 80s, are familiar with this idea, you eat a lot of broccoli and chicken, and it's zero fat, high protein, moderate carb is a bodybuilder's diet, or maybe even high carb. So what made you think this could be different for you?
So it's honestly just trial by fire. That's what I was doing. I was doing 6 or 7 meals a day, chicken and rice, broccoli, the standard bro dieting approach. And I just didn't feel good. I felt I was struggling with eating disorders at the time. I got really lean, but I lost a lot of muscle in the process. And I just was really disconnected with my nutrition. I would do binging and purging cycles. And I just felt like there had to be a better, more sustainable way to go about this. Plus, I didn't like being a slave to the food, eating 6 or 7 meals a day. Yeah. You're constantly fixated on when your next meal is. And there's more to life than that. So I started dabbling in the ketogenic diet. Didn't know that it was keto, and just I tried doing carbohydrate backloading, which is basically keto during the day and then high glycemic index carbs at night. And I noticed that I just felt better before I introduced those carbs. So I just started phasing them out, and lo and behold, I was doing carb backloading without carbs, which became keto. And about that time is when I heard the first podcast with, I think it was Dom D'Agostino and Tim Ferriss. So it's quite a while back, before there was any content on keto really. And I'm like, okay, that's what I'm doing. I'm going to dive deeper into this. And from a bodybuilding perspective, there was no research that I could find indicating that this would be effective, but my performance only improved, my training improved, my recovery went through the roof. Everything just got better. And I decided, okay, this is significantly improved from what I was doing. Let's just try and do an actual competition prep in a ketogenic state. And that's what I did in 2017. That's when I actually earned my pro card. I was able to get leaner than I ever had following a traditional carbohydrate-based approach. And it was more sustainable. It was healthier. My hormones didn't tank. And it was just more enjoyable. So I'm like, okay, this is where it's at. I haven't looked back since.
Awesome. So one of the things that can be discussed in a ketogenic arena, you'll hear different people, like calories are a big point of contention, right? Things that make me nervous make me a little giddy. So I'm a little bit like, the whole concept of calories are contentious, to repeat myself. Yeah. And so what do you think about sounds like a dumb question, but what do you think about calories?
So the debate seems to be between like, it's like a hormones versus calories debate. I feel like that's probably the right. two biggest contending factors here. And the truth of the matter is they both matter. Like hormones matter and calories matter. To suggest that calories don't count is ridiculous. And to suggest that hormones don't have an impact is also ridiculous. Like you have to embrace and accept the fact that they both matter and they both will have an impact. So trying to understand that and then be strategic in how you manipulate those variables is key. But understanding that those both do matter is, paramount. Like you have to know that calories count.
Got it. So now, just to get a sort of baseline perspective, because it applies to the discussion we're going to get into a bit. Because if calories are fake, then the rest of our discussion doesn't make any sense.
Now, I will preface that because a lot of the people that are arguing against the calorie counting, phenomenon, like they're coming from a place of, look, eat your meat, eat whole foods, and not worry about calories. And that there's nothing wrong with that. Like there's a lot of truth to that. Like if you're eating high quality foods, like a ketogenic diet would indicate, then your body is going to be much better at self-regulating, and you're going to be more in tune with what your body's needs are. So if you're going to avoid counting calories and not really putting them on a pedestal, then I would absolutely recommend doing so in a ketogenic state. And you're going to be able to get away with that much easier. But that doesn't mean that they don't count.
Right. Yeah. I mean, for the most part, I see a lot of people embracing a whole foods, very low carb diet where they get back kind of in touch with what satiety can feel like. Mm-hmm. And they never have to calculate anything.
Right. Totally. And you can totally do that. I mean, when I'm in an off season, I'm often doing that because it's like, it's not fun to constantly be counting and tracking everything. Like have a break from that every once in a while. And if you're happy with where you're at compositionally speaking and from a health standpoint, then you don't need to obsess about the numbers. But that doesn't mean that the calories are just non-existent fairy tales that don't exist. They are there. They do matter. Your body's just really good at regulating that caloric intake.
Right. Because there have been some studies that show a ketogenic state does a couple of things. One is it makes you less hungry, so you don't really notice if you're eating less calories. And then another thing is it actually does seem to give a metabolic advantage that just when your hormones are in the proper state, your body does not retain body fat as significantly.
Yeah. And it's funny because like I'm coming from a bodybuilding perspective. And if you peel the curtain back on most bodybuilders, they are so much on the other side of the spectrum where it's like they put calories on a pedestal, like if you fit your macros, flexible dieting all the way, like even considering other factors like hormones and sleep are irrelevant, like it's all about the calorie. And I don't necessarily agree with that either. Like there's a blend. Right.
I mean, it really, I mean, where I come from is if your hormones aren't right, it's just like everything else is kind of out the window.
Yeah. I mean, and the same is true. Like if on the other end of the spectrum, if you're trying to lose weight, but you're eating so obsessively beyond what your caloric maintenance is, then everything else is out the window as well. Like there's definitely
it's a balance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. But I mean, so I want to just preface this. So I think people get this, but we, like, most of the people watching this are probably like in the 80% or even like 90% of the population, maybe even 99% of the population, where we aren't going to the extra effort. Like, Robert is like a body scientist. Like, he's tweaking, tracking, experimenting to get to, I mean, what's the lowest body fat you've gotten to?
3%, I believe.
3% body fat, people. Which means you have around 5 pounds of body fat, right?
Yeah, it's definitely not sustainable. Like, I don't recommend it.
Yeah. So, like, that's not a normal person.
Right.
I mean, I'm not calling Robert weird, but I mean, that's like top percent of the population athlete. That's not just a human, right? Not he's also human, but I mean, this is his thing. This is his job. This is his performance, right? Yeah. So what would you say is a healthy body fat range for a man and a woman? Like, just like, won't have any, the body fat's not an issue. Not a problem. So
it kind of, depends what you're shooting for, like what your goals are.
Right.
Like,
right.
For a man, like, I can easily and sustainably carry between 8 and 12, 14% body fat on the high end and maintain that pretty effortlessly from a hormonal standpoint, from a caloric standpoint, from a productive and performance standpoint. Like, you can be between 8 and 14% as a man and be totally fine, look great, feel great, and just be rock solid. For a female, again, not really taking into consideration, like, age, is just like a general ballpark.
Right.
You have to kind of take age into consideration, but just throwing out a general ballpark number, I think between, like, I don't know, 18 and 25, maybe even 30% for some, is totally sustainable, totally healthy. Even, some women carry more fat and they're like, they look amazing at like 35%, but they have a lot of lean tissue as well. Like, having more body fat while also having more lean tissue is key. Like, if you have 40% body fat and very little muscle mass, that's not near as healthy as
very different
body fat with a lot of lean tissue.
Right. And so one of the things that I struggle with when I talk to people about what their body comp should be around, because I kind of agree with those numbers, I think those are pretty healthy people, is that there are a few ways to measure what your approximate body fat is, right? Like a DEXA scan and a bod pod and an in-body. And like, so there's these various measures. And I will have it tends to be older women that have dieted a lot over the course of their life will come to me, and I would expect them to have like 100 pounds of lean body mass, and they have like 80. Yeah. Do you run into that?
Yeah, it's honestly pretty common, especially if they don't really resistance train. Like, if like resistance training is the best thing you can do to improve lean tissue, like, bar none. Like, there's nothing else that comes close to it. Now, there's other things you can do for fitness if resistance training isn't your thing. But if you want to, especially from a longevity standpoint, like if you want to put more quality years on the end of your life, then I would definitely incorporate some form of resistance training, because not only does that build lean muscle tissue, it helps you maintain the muscle tissue that you have. If your body's like, just by default, like when you get older and you do start coming into, some health issues or you lose some mobility, like, if you're not using that muscle tissue, like, it has no reason to stay there. Like, it's gonna, leave. So stimulating that muscle tissue and giving it reason to stay there is going to be key. So yeah, I think prioritizing resistance training, whether you're wanting to step on stage as a bodybuilder or just simply have another couple quality years, is going to be key.
Right. There are a lot of studies that show that essentially it's a very simple equation. The more lean body mass you have, which you guys, that's lean body mass is everything but your fat mass. So it's bone and muscle, but generally the only way to change that is the muscle part. You can't add more bone. So, it having a better, higher lean body mass percentage, or just pure poundage as you age means you live longer, healthier, have a longer health span, all that.
Totally. You look at just the bone. Like, if you have healthy bone structures, dense skeletal structure, and that starts to wane as you get older. If you have more muscle surrounding that, then you get more, like, if you fall, you're much less likely to break a bone if you've got several pounds of lean muscle surrounding that skeletal structure. Then
it's stronger.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, great. So one of the things that I'm amazed by is that, so Robert, I'll put some links up to some of his posts recently. So you were going to do a show recently, but of course, with the current situation, that didn't happen.
Correct.
Yeah. But instead you did a photo shoot that was amazing. So those pictures are super.
Thank you. I thought it turned out great. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what happens? So in an optimum world, right? Say you have a client or yourself, and you're coming up to a contest. So so obviously you're increasing the amount of weights they're lifting and the time in the gym and all that. So that's on the exercise side. On the diet side, what are you doing, say 3 months or 6 months up to a contest? And then on the backside, what's the pattern?
So honestly, I don't really change my training that much. My training pretty much stays consistent throughout. Like I want to.
How much do you train, just so people know?
I do like an 8-day rotation. So for every 8 days, I'm training 6 of those days, and then I have 2 recovery days in that 8-day cycle. I do like some light running every single day. That's more so for me to meditate than anything. But 6 days of 8 are training.
Okay.
And then as far as the nutrition goes, I basically establish what my maintenance is, and then I gradually titrate calories down over the course of that contest prep. And then I'll also play with the ratios of where those macronutrients are coming from, depending on where I'm at in that prep and where my body composition is changing. Whether it be higher protein, higher fat. I keep carbs obviously minimal throughout, since I'm doing it from a ketogenic standpoint. But calories continue to titrate down over the course of that prep till they reach the bottom. So the lowest I would go, the floor. And then typically towards the end there, I'll start introducing some keto caloric refeed. So there at the end, when calories are low and my body starts to plateau, I'll introduce some high calorie days, 30%, 50%, sometimes even 100% increase in daily calories to ramp up my metabolism, give my body a new stimulus. Honestly, de-stress me, give my psychological willpower a break from the months of dieting, and then benefit from that. And then that's when I'll peak for the show. And then after that show, I'll go into a reverse diet where I start increasing calories in a strategic manner to basically maximize my recovery, improve my hormone standpoint, and minimize any unnecessary fat gain as calories are ramping back up.
Got it. So, one of the things that I've started to institute with my clients is if I do like a 8-week or a 12-week program, I tell them at the end of the program, don't keep going at, if your calories have gotten really low, I want you to actually not keep going.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. Yeah. Because one of the things that I think I must have started keto around the same time as you, because I heard the same podcasts on Tim Ferriss. He had 2. He had Dom D'Agostino and he had Peter Attia, both on his podcast, like within a short period of time. And those were the turning points for me. So
those are the first things, like that and Jimmy Moore's Keto Clarity. Those are the only things that were out there for a long time. That was it. Yeah. And Maria Emmerich had like 1 or 2 cookbooks at the time. She has like 27 now. She had like 1 or 2. So, but one of the things that I heard a lot when I first started keto was like that thing that happens on carbs where you go into starvation mode doesn't happen on keto. That your body, because it's pulling from your stores of body fat, it can't tell the difference between what you're eating and what you're burning from your body fat. So really, even if you're only eating 600 or 700 calories a day, your body isn't going to go into, quote unquote, starvation mode. What's been your experience around that? So define starvation mode for me.
Okay. Good answer. Good question. Good follow-up. So there's this concept, which I'll call starvation mode, which is basically like your body is like, hey, this person is not giving me any food. And so what I'm going to do is turn down their metabolic rate to meet the level of food that I'm getting so that I'm not so you ramp it down because the body kind of wants to maintain some homeostasis.
Yeah.
Energetically.
So there is a down regulation of your metabolism that does occur. And there is a there's a homeostatic set point that your body has that you have to break through. Yeah. But there's a lot of people that argue that, starvation mode is quote unquote what happens when you take calories down very far and then for whatever reason you just stop losing body fat. Like if you look at countries that are impoverished and there's just no food and people are just totally emaciated, they're definitely not eating as much as they need to be, but they're still losing weight.
Body fat.
They're still losing body fat. It's not healthy, obviously. Like that's not the direction you want to take things.
They're also losing muscle and, all that.
Yeah, you're losing muscle. So I have a hard time grasping the concept that like your body's just not going to move or pivot. Like there are definitely instances where, that's a very stressful environment for the body to be in. And a lot of people will retain a ton of fluid. Like it's amazing how much fluid.
Yeah.
When your body is going through just chronic stress and things are just not optimal in that regard, you can retain a bunch of fluids and your weight will absolutely plateau for a period of time. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's because you've reached a caloric set point and no matter what happens, your body just can't get any leaner. However, I would argue that you never want to get that low in calories to begin with. Like you need to have more strategy with regard to what your starting baseline is so that when you do cut calories, you can do so and still stay within healthy boundaries. Like if you go below that point, you're really only shooting yourself in the foot in the first place because it's not healthy to be in that just chronic, stress standpoint for any length of time in the first place. And then when you do increase calories, because inevitably you will, it's going to result in a more adverse effect if you take it too low to begin with.
Right, because maybe you've gotten your body used to saying, oh, we know how to function on 900 calories a day. So now you're giving me 12 and that's surplus.
Yeah. Like when you look at, how can I use this as an example? So if you're chronically taking calories down farther and farther and farther, and your body starts to downregulate your metabolism to meet the intake that you're putting in, like your NEAT activity goes down, like your energy expenditure is going to decrease by default. But then your body is smart, like it's evolved to survive. And if you're only consuming X number of calories and then you start titrating those calories back up, there's going to be a recovery period. And initially, your body's just going to be convinced that, hey, food is still scarce. We're getting this like godsend of food in for a second. So let's automatically just harbor it all as stored body fat.
We don't know if this is going to continue, this surplus. Right. So we want to store that.
Yep. So you have to convince your body otherwise that, hey, look, food is no longer scarce, chronically. Like you can be healthy. You can use this extra intake and food for fuel as opposed to just automatically storing it as body fat. And that takes time.
Got it. So is that the idea behind so one of the concepts that I hear from the bodybuilding world and that I've heard from you is this concept of reverse dieting. So on the front end, leading up to a contest, the prep, you're doing what you guys would call a cut, right? Which is kind of a slow, gradual decline in intake of food.
Yeah, ideally you want to be like a lot of people they slash their calories a ton right at the gates, but that's not really optimal, especially if you want to preserve as much lean muscle tissue as possible. So having a longer cut, being much more gradual with that caloric.
Right, you kind of want this way, not like this way.
Exactly. That's just going to preserve the lean tissue you have. It's going to make the cutting process more sustainable in the first place. It's just going to make the whole thing much more enjoyable. And then, when you reach the depth of that and your calories are at their lowest, then strategically ramping calories back up. Because just as using some numbers as an example, like if my baseline is at about 3,500 calories, like if I can maintain a healthy, maintenance weight of like 175 pounds at 3,500 calories pretty effortlessly, and I take my calories down to the lowest I got this last prep was 1,700, which is pretty low for me. I was definitely hungry. And hormones are affected when you go that low below maintenance. It's just not sustainable. Like I achieve a goal, I hit the target's composition that I was looking for, and then I peaked for an event. And then I intended, and I am, that's what I'm in the process of doing right now, is ramping calories back up. And ideally, the goal is to ramp calories back up in a strategic way so that when I'm done and I reach that maintenance again, my maintenance is higher than it was when I started, but my body composition is leaner than it was when I started. So basically, by the end of this reverse diet, I will be consuming 4,000 calories instead of 3,500, just as an example. And then rather than starting at 14% body fat, I'm ending this reverse diet at 12% body fat, for instance.
Got it. And is part of that you put on a little bit more muscle? Because obviously the more muscle you have, the more your metabolic rate becomes, because muscle is metabolically expensive. But, or is your muscle mass about the same as the end of the last round?
You definitely want to put on more lean tissue in that time. So you want to have more lean muscle mass, which is going to help with your metabolism. But then also just from a hormonal standpoint, like my muscle mass is not going to increase drastically in the course of a few months, but it will increase some. But then also my body's set point is improved. My homeostatic set point is improved. Like I've been eating a ton of calories in this reverse diet, but I've done so in a strategic way so that I haven't put on any unnecessary body fat. And I'm tracking this all along the way. Like I'm tracking my body fat percentage every 2 weeks. I'm taking pictures. I'm taking measurements. Like I'm making sure not to get too sloppy with things. Like I want to be gradual with it, but then do so in a way that is sustainable, is enjoyable, and then results in an outcome that's more favorable than it was when I started.
Right. So, we talked like a year ago when I was in a really frustrated place where I had lost quite a bit of weight when I started keto. Then I kind of like plateaued. I had hit what, was clearly a set point for my body. And then I even started gaining a little weight, and I was tracking my macros and my calories. And I was like, I'm not that high, compared to, like, you were shocked when I told you how many calories I was eating. You would think it would be a lot higher. Do you run into that? Because I run into that with women a lot, where they lose a bunch and then they hit this homeostatic point and they can't escape it. Now, I will say a good portion of those women are not tracking well. Yeah. So, like, one of the reasons that people hit that stall point, I'm just going to get this out of the way because it's the number one thing that people bring up, is that they're kind of lying to themselves, right? Like they think they're eating 1,300 calories, but they're really eating 2,000, because it's pretty easy when you're eyeballing things to do that. But then there are some people who really are eating, 1,300 calories or whatever, and they're just like, I don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see it all the time, especially in women. I see it in men too, but it's just incredibly common in females. They will have followed, every different dieting protocol out there, every different hack out there, every different like summer shred that you see in the magazine, and they're all very low calorie diets for the most part. So just constantly in a caloric deficit with no legitimate reverse diet. There's no legitimate ramping up of calories. And if you're just chronically keeping your body in a deficit, it's wreaking havoc on your metabolism. It's wreaking havoc on your baseline. It's just really screwing things up from a hormonal standpoint, and it's making it that much harder to recover. Nothing is irreversible. Like I truly believe you can improve your set point, your composition, your metabolism. But the longer you're in that chronically depleted state, the longer it's going to take to improve that position. So not being in a deficit. I mean, my rule of thumb is like if I'm in a deficit for 6 months, for instance, I don't go into another competition prep for sometimes as much as 2.5, 3 years. Like I'm not doing a summer shred.
I almost have to like at least double the time, like the cut time, right?
I do like a 3-to-1. Like if I'm cutting for 1 month, then I need to be in at least a maintenance or a surplus for 3 months. That's a good rule of thumb. But honestly, the longer the better. Within reason. You don't want to be like in a permanent bulk. That's not really good either.
Right.
But yeah, like having a legitimate time to build lean tissue, because it's hard to build lean tissue if you're in a caloric deficit. It's possible, but it's not going to be optimal. So if you have a legitimate building phase, then you're going to improve your metabolism by having that extra lean tissue in the first place.
Got it. And so I think one of the things that Robert's pointing out that a lot of us don't, a lot of us who want results now, is this all takes a crap load of time.
Oh yeah. Like you have to just smile at that fact and embrace it wholeheartedly, because if you don't, you're going to be chronically pissed off and chronically malnourished. I mean, like that's just the fact of the matter. Like I've been training now for 11 years and, you know, I've taken measurements, I've taken, you know, pictures that entire time. I looked at what weight I was moving when I first started lifting and it was laughable. You know, it was laughable, but
it would not be laughable to most of us, Robert, I will say.
I don't know. It was pretty measly. But you have to have that. You have to have that starting point and you have to build from that. But if you, that's why I like the ketogenic diet, because it's so sustainable. It's enjoyable. It's got this community that allows you to like just plug in and throw ideas off one another and make it fun in the first place. Like if you didn't have that, I don't know that I would be able to sustain it, but I have that. We all have that. We all have it at our fingertips. So leverage it.
Yeah. So one of the things that I experienced, like a year ago when we talked, I was like, I need to figure something out. So I took kind of some of our conversations around the concepts of reverse dieting. And I just did a combination of kind of, you know, for a while I stopped tracking, but I kind of monitored my weight and made sure it wasn't going up significantly, but like, and I would kind of just see how I could just gradually increase the amount of food I ate so that I felt saner, happier, healthier generally. I wasn't losing weight, but I wasn't gaining weight. Mm-hmm. And kind of when I hit that level, I sort of maintained it for several months while trying to increase my activity and some of my resistance training, you know, not as significantly as I probably should have, but, you know, at least kind of get a baseline start. And when this whole stay-at-home order thing started, I was like, well, it might be a good time to see if I can get a new low, right? Get back down. So I started tracking and weighing, like everything went on the scale and, you know, the food scale and measuring. And lo and behold, in 1 month, I was able to drop 7 pounds that I had not been I had spent a year trying to lose. And I really honestly think it was a combination of the meticulous tracking now, but that wouldn't have worked if I hadn't allowed my body that break.
Totally. I mean, this is the first time I've seen you in months, but I can tell that you're leaner in your face. I can tell.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
But it's so true. Like if you don't have a legitimate period where you're at least at maintenance, preferably a little bit of a surplus, then you're just not going to have the results you want from a cutting standpoint. Like you're not going to be able to get leaner as efficiently or as effectively as if you do have that period of time where you're at a maintenance or surplus. Like that's just, that's beyond contestation.
Right. So a couple of people have asked some questions about fasting. Do you incorporate any fasting in your program, in your approach?
So I do, like if I'm in a caloric deficit, I'll do like an intermittent fast, like a 16-8 or something like that. I just prefer, like if I'm eating fewer calories, I would prefer to have one bigger meal that actually leaves me satiated during that time frame than like multiple smaller meals that equal the same calories but always leave me wanting more. So I kind of do an intermittent fast.
Yeah, I've seen you do OMAD, 1 meal a day at certain times. Right.
So I'll do something like that once my calories get lower, but I do not necessarily recommend doing extended fasts in the context of a caloric deficit, because being in a caloric deficit in and of itself is a stressor on the body. So there's no need to add additional stressors that you don't really need by having an extended fast in the mix as well.
Right. So, you know, I always hear from people that do a lot of fasting or that teach about fasting that you have to feast as much as you fast.
Right.
And so that would mean that essentially on the days that you're eating enough to kind of make your body know that you're not in a long-term deficit when you have a day or a 2 or even a 3 or 4 day fast.
Yeah, like your body doesn't know the difference. I mean, there is a circadian rhythm, but your body doesn't know the difference between a 24-hour clock and a 16-hour clock, you know. So, but it knows if you're in a net positive or net negative is from a
Right.
caloric standpoint. So if you're eating a ton of food, but then you have a period that's not eating any food, like your body can benefit from that. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing a period of minimal food and then also a period of no food, you know?
Right. So that I mean, obviously, I think there are a lot of approaches that work for fat loss, and certainly fasting is one of them. But I think that we're all a little unique, and some people don't do as well with fasting as others.
Yeah, and fasting is great, but fasting is not designed to be a weight loss strategy. Like fasting is for, autophagy, cell turnover, improving your, insulin sensitivity.
Insulin. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like there's a ton of benefits from fasting, but it was never designed to be like a sustainable approach to weight loss or body recomp. Like I don't think anybody should look at fasting in that regard.
Right. So when you're working with a client post contest or event, whatever they're doing, when they hit kind of their low,
mm-hmm.
How do you, so with the reverse dieting, you're very gradually upping calories. Is that correct?
So it kind of depends.
Okay.
With a ketogenic protocol, with my protocol, what I'll typically do is their protein will be lower there towards the very tail end of their contest prep, because when you're in a deficit or when you're in a prep or something like that, you're not prioritizing muscle building. You're not trying to build muscle. Right. You're trying to sustain and maintain the muscle that you have built. So if the protein's lower relative to my fat ratio, then I'm going to have, generally speaking, more ketone production. I'm going to be in a more anti-catabolic state. So actually, this baffles most bodybuilders, but by having less protein there towards the end, I'm actually going to preserve the lean muscle tissue that I have more so than if I was to have more protein. So
that is a big head scratcher for a lot of people.
It is a big head scratcher, but it's true, and I can attest to that. So since protein's low there towards the end, and the end being like the last month or so of that competition prep, what I'll typically do is when the reverse diet starts, I'll go ahead and bump protein up to equal what lean mass equals. So like if for me, for instance, I calculated my lean mass at the end of my prep at about 150, 155 pounds, roughly in that area. So I went ahead and I bumped protein up to 150 grams. That way of it
pretty much right away.
Pretty much right away. Yeah. Like you're not really going to see any adverse effects from a compositional standpoint by going ahead and bumping up protein once you've peaked. Not necessarily something you want to do if you have not yet peaked, but once you've peaked, go ahead and feel free to bump up protein. And then from there, I'll start gradually titrating overall calories up. And I have those refeeds at the end of the prep, so I'll go ahead and leave those refeeds in the reverse diet. And typically, what I would recommend doing is titrating the refeed calories down as the weekly calories continue to rise, if that makes sense.
Got it.
So there's less need for the refeeds because you're going to be increasing your weekly and your daily caloric intake. So the daily caloric intake rises, the refeeds decrease until they more or less meet in the middle, and then you could pretty much phase out the refeeds.
Got it. So, so conceptually, I think people have got us that you're a little bit of like a U shape, right, in terms of what you're doing. And so there's a cut on one side and then the reverse diet on the other side. And the idea is over time, you're sort of stair-stepping your way to a higher level of maintenance calories and also a higher level of weight loss calories, if that makes sense. So the whole thing is shifting up and to the right.
Exactly. I've got a really good graph that illustrates this that I've had in some of my presentations. But basically, you're going through this cycle of, say you have a body fat percentage of 15 and your average caloric intake at maintenance is 3,500. You go through a prep, you get down to 1,500 calories. You get down to 5% body fat. Then you cycle back up and do a reverse diet. When you're at the end of that reverse diet, you're at 3,800 calories and only 13% body fat. And then you just keep cycling through that. You have like legitimate building phase, legitimate reverse diet phase, and you stay at maintenance or surplus long enough to build quality lean tissue and improve your caloric set point. And then you just continue to cycle through that year after year after year. Not necessarily doing a cut every year, but you go through that cycle over the course of several years, your lifetime. And each time you go through it, you improve your set point, you improve your metabolic baseline, you improve your compositional baseline. And it just becomes this sustainable way of life that gets better and better and better. It's like a glass of fine wine,
So tell me one other thing. So there's a lot of back and forth and debate, and it feels like protein's winning right now. But in terms of like how much protein versus how much fat, I think we all tend to agree that the carbs need to be pretty low. You keep your carbs under 20, but during a cut under 10 grams, right?
Yeah, so they'll typically be 20 to start, just because I'm eating so much more calories. I'm going to get more trace carbs, so they'll be around 20. I never have like legitimate carb days. And then I'll take those down. As my calories get lower, my trace carbs get lower, so it'll go from 20 to like 15 to 10. Usually there at the end. I eat a keto brick every single day of the prep and the reverse diet. So there's some trace carbs in the keto brick. So that's pretty much where all
I forgot to mention you make the keto brick. I mentioned the keto brick and he makes it.
Yep, that's me. So I'll have that from a carb standpoint. It's funny from a protein standpoint. Like I've been kind of painted into the picture of this high fat version keto guy. And I'm definitely an advocate for high fat.
Right.
I need adequate protein. People need adequate protein.
Right.
You don't need to have obsessive protein. You don't need to underconsume protein. Like you need adequate protein. Adequate on all macronutrients. Adequate fat intake. And it's funny because protein is given this halo right now. And it's
it does have a bit of a halo that is free calories, kind of free protein.
Which it's definitely not free calories. It's so much contextually based though. And I think I figured out why it's in this halo right now. So let me get on this too. I found that the longer you are keto adapted, the more deeply keto adapted you are, the higher protein threshold you have. Like I've tracked all my numbers from the beginning. Have had hundreds of clients over the years. I've tracked all of their data, and I've noticed that the longer one is adapted, the higher that protein threshold becomes. So if you've been adapted for a long period of time, you can tolerate more protein. Everyone that's touting high protein right now, I mean, we've been in the keto space for a while now. Like it's past its hype. Like we've been here for a while. Right. So we've been adapted long enough to reset that protein threshold at a higher intake. So the people that are preaching high protein can tolerate much higher protein now than they could this time 3 years ago. That's why it's kind of in the literature right now. But if someone is just getting keto adapted and they haven't really been keto for any length of time, I would definitely advocate a high fat approach to begin with, because even if they have a lot of body fat to lose, if their body is not efficient at using and tapping into that fat, then it's just going to be an uphill battle for them. So starting with a higher fat ratio, forcing their body to acclimate to using fat in the first place is going to be much, much better off for them. And honestly, I perform mentally better with the higher fat ratio. So even though I can have a high protein threshold and get away with eating more protein, I just prefer and gravitate towards having a higher fat ratio overall. I feel like a 1-to-1 is a pretty solid baseline. Like you can maintain at 1-to-1 and then you can titrate that fat ratio up from there. I don't really have any clients that benefit from a significantly higher protein than fat intake though.
Got it. So you're going somewhere between 1-to-1 to a little bit higher on the fat, maybe like 1.5-to-1 kind of concept.
Or even 2-to-1. It just kind of depends where I'm at. It depends where my calories are at too. Like if I'm at a much lower caloric intake, I'm going to feel much better if my fat ratio is higher. If I'm at more of a caloric maintenance or surplus, then I'm still taking in a lot of dietary fat because calories are so much higher, but I can do more of that 1-to-1. I don't really ever recommend doing a 2-to-1 protein to fat.
Got it.
I've played around with higher protein with some of my clients lately because they've been open to trying it and they just want to see. And it's funny because I have gathered so much data over the years, and right now everybody's preaching high protein and how like if you have a lot of body fat to lose, just increase that protein. It's more thermogenic, and you're going to just have that body weight melt off. Without fail, all of my clients that have the higher protein, like a 2-to-1 protein to fat, like they just plateau, like it's just stagnant, no drop. As soon as I start going back to what I've always preached and have a higher fat ratio, the weight starts falling off and they feel better. Like it's literally comical to me how this protein's been given this halo, and it's not really warranted, I don't think.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that has gained some significant popularity over the past few months, years, I don't know, all the time runs together, is the protein sparing modified fast.
Yeah.
And I actually have worked with a few clients doing it, but we do it 3 days a week, and then, so just change it up. And it has seemed to have some positive body fat loss effects for some people. And then in other people, it doesn't seem to have a positive effect. And so there's some variation.
Low calorie diet. Like it's a very low calorie approach.
It's like super low.
Yeah. And if you are going to get some initial loss from doing that significant drop in calories, no question, and if you're going to have a significant drop in calories like that, then you're probably better off doing it that, high protein, sparing modified fast standpoint. But I don't ever advocate crazy drops in calories like that.
Right.
So
right.
For that reason alone, I'm not really going to be an advocate for the PMSF or however you.
Yeah. Nobody can. Anyway, but it's so one of the things that I have noticed, and to your point, now 4 years into keto, I can eat almost double the amount of protein I could at the beginning and maintain very high, ketosis and not gain weight, so I do agree. And I think it's, if you Ben Bickman, right? Dr. Ben Bickman, one of his talks talked about the fact that when you're in a ketogenic state versus a carb-based state, how your body reacts to protein is very different.
Yeah.
And it might factor in that over time, the lowered insulin resistance makes a big difference. Like you kind of have to be by the time you do really well with higher protein, you might have to be fairly insulin sensitive.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with protein. Like there's definitely a sector of the keto space that has gone the total opposite in the spectrum. They're like, you have to have very minimal protein, like you have to have super high fat. And that has had a negative effect overall too. Like people have, like their nails stop growing. They lose their hair. Like they start seeing, muscle loss. Like I don't advocate for that either. Like everybody has a different protein threshold, and there's different amounts of adequate protein for each individual based off of their level of lean tissue, their activity level, lots of factors at play here.
So let's not consider the advanced bodybuilder person, right? Think about your clients who are just trying to get as lean as is healthy for them, not so lean that they can win a contest.
Mm-hmm.
In that population, do you have a sense of how low you might take the protein in regards to lean body mass? Like, do you stay above 0.6 grams per pound, or is it not quite that calculatable?
Yeah, I feel like at 0.6 grams per pound, you're not going to be in an optimal state for building lean tissue. But I feel like you would be fine if you are deep keto adapted to not risk losing a bunch of lean tissue. I wouldn't really go below that. But, I think from like a 0.8 to 1.2 is like a good general window to be in is totally fine, adequate. I wouldn't really go much below that. Or if you go much beyond that, you're probably going to see some, gradual increases in blood glucose. Like for me, if I start bumping my protein up very high relative to my fat, I'll notice more inflammation. My joints hurt more. I don't feel as sharp, mentally speaking. My ketones drop, my blood glucose rises, and I feel more bloated. That to me is a pretty good indicator that I've reached my protein threshold.
Right. So how do you work with people on that? Like if you're trying to dial in what their protein threshold might be, what do you have them do?
So I'll typically start them at about 80% of their calories coming from fat so that we can just take the guesswork out of the equation and know that they're getting a high fat ratio approach to start. And then I'll gradually titrate their calories down by increasing protein slightly and decreasing fat slightly. Since fat has 9 grams or 9 calories per gram, protein's 4, if I'm taking, 5 grams away from fat and increasing 5 grams of protein, overall calories are still dropping, but the protein ratio is increasing. And then at some point there, I'll start to see some adverse effects, whether it be a plateau in weight loss. This is all in the context of them trying to lose weight as the primary objective.
Right.
But if I start to see some adverse effects from like a blood glucose standpoint, a ketone standpoint, what they're telling me just in their feedback of how they feel and perform, then I'll kind of know, just basically, I've done it so many clients now, I can kind of tell what their threshold is going to be. And that's going to be, it's interesting because people who you would think have very similar backgrounds, similar compositional physiques, et cetera, they'll have totally different protein thresholds. So it truly is something you just have to experiment with and figure out what yours is.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, one of the big head scratchers in this world is, right, there are people who do things like higher protein, lower fat, and they drop a ton of body weight and they do really well. And then there are other people who end up it doesn't work at all for them. And then have you heard of Keto AF? There's this little movement. It stands for keto animal foods. So it's a carnivore diet, but it's 2-to-1 fat to protein. So it's basically like, you could kind of look at it like the pork belly diet. It's like very, very high fat and almost zero carb, no plant matter whatsoever. And this is a population where it looks like people, especially people that are very metabolically unhealthy to start with, seem to actually start to lose weight for the first time in all their approaches.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great example of a very strict carnivore approach with a high fat protocol. I mean, that's going to basically jumpstart their ketone production, minimize any risk of like inflammation from, anti-nutrients in certain vegetables. Like, it's really going to pull out all the stops and just ramp up ketone production. So I can see how that could be advantageous for a certain population for sure. Whether they're going to sustain that long term, I don't know. I mean, I would never want people to go so much in the direction of high fat, minimal protein that they don't really ever figure out what their protein threshold is, because I think it's beneficial to consume as much protein as you can tolerate in a positive light, because protein's good. It's the building blocks for lean tissue. So have as much as you can without the adverse effects. And the cool thing is, like, that changes over time. Like, that's why you constantly have to be pulling different levers and tweaking and adjusting and tracking, because what your protein threshold is, this year may not be what it is this time next year. So just being open to that is key.
Right. All of that's going to shift depending on how much you're training, if you're training at all, how much are you sleeping? I mean, there's so much that goes into what makes a person healthy.
Definitely.
Yeah. So we got a couple of questions. So M is from the UK and says she doesn't know what keto bricks are. Can you tell her?
So keto bricks are, it's a product that was never meant to be a product. It was something that I made for my own personal consumption during my 2017 competition prep. And I just wanted a shelf-stable, perfect ketogenic macro ratio meal replacement bar to just take the guesswork out of my nutrition. And I made this thing. It was like a keto blob at the time. It wasn't the brick that you see today, but it's basically 1,000 calories. It's got the perfect macro ratio, very high fat relative to protein, very low total carbs. And it's really good for me and for other people that are wanting to just get their keto macros dialed in, because it's pretty easy to find sources of protein out there. Like, you can get protein left and right, but it's harder to find sources of really high fat, quality fat that doesn't cause GI upset, especially in the context.
It doesn't melt when you carry it with you and things like that.
Yeah, it doesn't melt when you carry it with you. So like what I've kind of been doing lately, and it's kind of growing in popularity, is doing like a meat and bricks approach to nutrition. Is I'll have like a keto brick and I'll have a good nutritious source of meat as a protein source. And those two paired together, and you're pretty much going to have the perfect ratio, and you'll feel good and perform great.
Right. So basically, it's somewhere between a fat bomb and a meal replacement. Is what I kind of think of it. And it's shelf stable, which makes it really nice.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So they're tasty is the other part, but they're not super sweet. So a lot of us who lose our degree of sweet tooth anyway, they don't tend to kick in the cravings like something overly sweet would.
Yeah, like I can eat a keto brick and I don't feel like I need to reach for more. Like I don't put keto brick in the category of like a keto snack bar. Like it's not something it's not like a 200 calorie snack bar that's designed to be like a carbohydrate lookalike where you eat it and you just feel like you're eating something you shouldn't. Like I can eat the keto brick, and I have eaten the keto brick every single day during my prep and my reverse diet, and it's only been a performance benefit and a boost. I don't feel guilty when I eat it.
Right. And just so you guys know, like those of us that do not have such high calorie needs as Robert, do not eat a whole brick in a sitting. You can cut them up or melt them down and make smaller amounts. So that's what I tend to do if I'm going to employ them, because I don't think I could eat a whole brick in a sitting. That would be a little bit more than I could tolerate.
Oh, I can put them down. I had 3 the other day.
Oh my God. So we're all a little metabolically different people.
Yeah.
But okay. So Paige says, so not pro carnivore now. I'm not anti-carnivore, not at all. And I think for some people going carnivore is the thing they need to get the body they want. And then some people go carnivore. I've got plenty of clients who've gone carnivore for up to 2 years and they're still not at the body composition they want to be at. So carnivore is a very powerful tool in a toolkit, and sometimes it's not the only tool someone needs. That's my opinion on carnivore.
Yeah, I mean, I think carnivore is great. I kind of gravitate towards a carnivore-esque approach. Like I eat the keto bricks, which are not carnivore. I'll occasionally have some vegetables. I don't really feel like I benefit from a performance standpoint with vegetables, so I don't feel like you're really missing out much if you are eating nutrition.
They're more entertaining.
Yeah. They're more like just for variety than anything. But I don't think against them.
Got it. So, and then one of the other things that I would mention, because, the keto brick is a processed food. I don't think anyone's advocating our diet is primarily processed food, but of the processed food items you've got, it's really well formulated. So that's why I think that meat and bricks diet is probably super advantageous for people, because the meat is giving a lot of the fresh meat is giving a lot of the nutrients that you need to round out the fat content. And I would point out that the keto brick, it's dairy free, right? Yeah.
And like, I'll be the first to tell people that I would not advocate a brick only diet. Like there's been people that have tried it and I'm like, that's ridiculous. I would never recommend that. Like I always prioritize and recommend, whole food sources first. I feel like just pairing that with the brick has made my life easier and it's only benefited my performance. So like I have no problem recommending that, but definitely make sure you're getting that quality protein source.
Not a brick only. Yeah. So, but one of the things that I discovered the other month, I don't know, is the primary fat source in the keto bricks is cocoa butter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cacao butter. That's what I meant to say. And so it's very high in saturated fat, which is very advantageous on a ketogenic diet.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So what else? M says you should send some to the UK. The website.
We ship them everywhere, international.
Okay. Well, order enough and you can be the UK supplier. So the website is ketobrick.com. This was not a keto brick ad, but we were talking about keto bricks, so I thought I would let you guys know.
Well, thank you.
So Paulette wants to know what are some examples of how you eat? I mean, I guess you just said meat and bricks, but
yeah. So I've been really into chaffles lately. Like I made.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I've been like I bought this. So it's funny when you're in a contest prep and your calories are low, like you just start thinking about cool and creative ways to cook food. So I started seeing all these chaffle. That's when the chaffle hype was really gaining in popularity. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't have a waffle maker. How am I going to make chaffles? So I ordered this like massive industrial strength commercial waffle maker. That's huge. And
this is so Robert. The rest of us get like a teeny little waffle maker. Robert's like,
thing is not
the
teeny.
Big one.
This is the big one. But it's amazing. It cooks like 4 massive waffles at a time, and it's like takes up my whole countertop. But like it's evenly cooked throughout. It's just one and done. And I made one the other day that was just ground pork and eggs. That's all it was ground pork and eggs. And then it turned out perfectly. It was like nice and crisp, had like a perfect bread-like texture. And I used that as the buns for a 85-25 grass-fed beef patty that I had cooked up. So it was like a carnivore-esque. I mean, pretty much I put some ketchup on there. But it was totally tasty and totally nutritious. So felt totally good eating it. But yeah, something like that. Nice. And I'll get more creative if I want to. Like I'll have fish. I'll have like seafood. I've been trying to take Crystal on a date. We'll go out and we'll have, salmon or something like that. Or we'll have, where did we go the other day that was really good? I forget. Oh, I had I was craving crawfish. I had a bunch of crawfish. It's like crawfish season right now. But I mean, I eat a lot. Anything that's meat, quality meat, I'll eat that. Yeah. I don't really bat my head. I'll eat a lot of organ meats. I mean, I eat a lot of different foods, really.
Yeah, when I spent a weekend with Robert at a conference, it was during his contest prep, and you were eating OMAD, 1 meal a day. Mm-hmm. And it was, what was it, a keto brick, and then it was sort of like a dish that you'd created that was like ground venison, butter, and sardines. What was it?
I had a can of sardines, but I think it was probably scrambled eggs, and then a mix of ground venison and ground beef that I just scrambled together. So like, if you're really trying to track macros, the easiest and most efficient way to go about meal prep is to just can make it consist of some variety or quantity of eggs and ground beef. And then if you're doing like a higher fat ratio, you can do like a 75-25 ground beef, and then go to 80-20, and then 85-15, and then 90-10, and you can kind of adjust as your macros.
Dial it in.
Yeah, you can dial it in. Like one egg is roughly 5 grams of protein, 6 grams of fat, or no, it's vice versa. 6 grams of protein, 5 grams of fat, typically speaking. So it makes macro adjustments really easy. Add an egg, take away an egg. But keeping it simple like that is just one less thing to have to think about.
Got it. So, what would you, if you were my coach and I was like, hey, if you were my coach a year ago, right? And I was like, hey, I can't drop any weight. And what would you do with me?
I would increase your calories and have you train more, and then reset everything at a healthier, better baseline and then maintain that until I'm convinced that your body has reset itself, and then nothing has happened adverse to what we're trying to do. And then we can start titrating calories down and playing with the ratios to optimize and figure out what ratios you perform best at.
Got it. And so do you think, so a lot of people go keto and they're not training, right? They're not lifting, they're not resistance banding, they're not doing any exercise beyond wandering around the mall, right? And then a lot of people, to some degree, I don't have any percentage, will lose all the weight they want doing that. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I think we can all agree that's not optimal in terms of health, but there's also then some people that definitely seem to need to add resistance training at the very least to their routine to reach a desired body composition.
Right.
I guess that was not a very good question, but how often do you see people able to lose all the weight they want without adding any working out component?
I mean, I would definitely prioritize nutrition. Like, it's funny because, when you first start going to the gym and you start dabbling in nutrition, the question is, what percentage of it is training versus what percentage of it's, in the kitchen. And back then when I first started, it was like, oh, it's all training. Like, I would eat crap foods and just spend more time in the gym, and it felt like that was what was happening. Now, knowing what I know, I would definitely prioritize nutrition over the training. But my mindset towards it is it's not like, 100%. It's not like 90% nutrition, 10% training. It's like 100% nutrition, 100% training. That's just my mindset. Like, go all in, and optimize, and reach the goal. But
just
there's definitely, just do it. That's like akin to me wanting to start a business, but then just leaving more things to chance than is necessary. Like, if I want to build a business, like, I'm going to pick up some business books and do some learning and try and find a mentor. Like I want to try and optimize. But there is definitely a subset of people that can just tweak their nutrition and the weight seems to just start falling off. A lot of that depends on where they're at metabolically to begin with, what their NEAT activity is like. Like there's a lot of people that are doing a ton of energy expenditure, but they're not really.
You've said that twice, but people might not know.
Yeah, so NEAT is just simply all these acronyms, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So like you're fidgeting in your chair, you're dancing, you're singing, you're walking to the grocery store, like everything outside of, actual training. A lot of people don't necessarily train, but their NEAT activity is through the roof. Like they'll take their dog
or they garden a lot, or
they'll be doing something, or they're just moving. Like it's funny, when I was at the end of my prep and my calories were low, my NEAT was that's one of the first things to go when your calories drop. I mean, the you wouldn't even see me smiling right now. Like that takes up too much energy. And now I'm smiling and I'm moving and stuff. So being conscious of that, like there's a lot of other factors outside of just the time spent in the gym. But if you are coming from a place that is, very metabolically damaged, your calories and your metabolism been down-regulated, like take advantage of the levers and the variables that you have control over that can move you in the right direction and get you some momentum. Like training is a great stimulus that you have at your disposal to jumpstart things. And if you're coming from a damaged standpoint, then use that to your benefit.
Right. And then there's also the flip side where people are a little type A, right? Like they're a little aggro. And so they're like, okay, I started keto last week. I'm going to be in the gym 5 days a week and I'm going to cut my calories to 1,200. And I'm going to, and they're like, I'm going to do everything at once as hardcore as possible. And then their adrenals are shot and and their stress hormones are through the roof. And so there's an optimal balance.
Yeah. I love, not so much resistance training. Like you want to be able to push resistance training. It's really hard to overtrain resistance training like that. That's thrown around a lot.
Your muscles just won't let you.
Hard. Yeah, it's kind of hard to overtrain resistance, but it is not hard to overtrain from a cardio standpoint. So like if you're doing cardio, I like to think of cardio as having an inverse relationship to calories. Like I'm not drastically cutting calories and I'm not drastically ramping up cardio. Like as calories gradually drop, I gradually increase cardio. So it's got an almost inverse relationship.
Right. So, some people just mentioned, and it feels related, what do you do about cravings? And I think when I hear people say they're having horrible cravings, they might be in more of a caloric deficit than they want to be at that particular time. Do you find that, or how do you experience cravings?
So cravings in the context of like cravings for certain types of foods or just food in general?
So she has said that she's getting back on the wagon. I think she's had a period where she fell off of being ketogenic. And she's getting back on the horse, she says. And now she's got nighttime cravings because for a period of time recently, she's been just eating whatever she wants at night. And now she's stopping that behavior.
I feel like cravings for non-ketogenic foods in particular, it sounds like, are directly correlated with your degree of keto adaptation. The more deeply keto adapted you are, the less cravings you have, like period. Like you have to go through that phase of actually just mind over matter, not having those foods or having like ketogenic lookalike foods. Like when I first started the ketogenic diet, I was eating all the keto cookies, the keto pizzas, the keto cakes, the keto cheesecakes. Like that is still better than the carb version. So if that's acts as a stepping stone to make it easier to wean off of those carbs, then by all means use them. Don't become addicted to those and just rely heavily on them, but use that to get more deeply adapted in the first place, then you'll find that those cravings subside.
Right. I find for the first couple of weeks of somebody going back to keto, or maybe even just days, but to not be overly restrictive about fat and protein for a little bit of time, and eventually you'll stop thinking about the foods you're not eating anymore. So Paulette says, what if you can't work out physically? I would say, can you do anything? Like some people, if they're wheelchair bound, can move their upper body. So there are still some things that you can do to benefit that. But if you can, I have a quadriplegic person in my life who went keto, lost a ton of weight, did amazing. So, it's only what you can do. M says, every time I train, whether it be cardio or weight training, my weight loss stalls or I get, he's on his way back. So hang out, people. Whether it be cardio or weight training, my weight loss stalls or I gain. So my question is, how long are you giving it? So, Robert has more information than I do on this, but if it's a week or two and you're like, oh, screw it, I'm not going to do that if I'm going to gain weight for a week or two, that's not long enough. You got to give it time, because when you increase your cardio, when you increase your, specifically actually your weight training, your resistance training, your body retains more water weight. So that increase in water weight will look like weight gain or weight stalling on the scale, but you just need to give it longer. And in general, Roberta says, this is the best live I've heard in months. Woo! We win. Okay. What's your thought on exogenous ketones? Asked Wanda. I'll wait for Robert to come back. I am pro exogenous ketones if you have neurological issues, you have dementia, you have a traumatic brain injury, or you have cancer. They can be helpful in that way. I do not see them as a body fat reduction technique. So anyway, he is on his way back. If you want to keep asking questions, we'll go back and answer them. He had a technical issue. He's coming back. Oh, there he is. They were like, the internet gods didn't want people to know the secret.
Yeah. Can you hear me now? Is it working?
Yeah, we're good. So Brandon was having them carry a bag of. That's where we lost.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So his client just has this massive Ziploc bag full of bacon in the fridge. And if he finds that he's hungry and craving something, he'll go to the fridge and ask himself if he wants a piece of bacon. And if the answer is yes, then like the piece of bacon. If it's no, then he knows that he's just craving the sweet foods and not just food in general.
Right.
Like that. I think having some kind of way to safeguard yourself like that is key, because there's so many times where like you can eat real quality food, and be totally satisfied and then be done. But if you're eating like crappy, keto treats and stuff, then there's just no threshold on that. Like, you can just keep
going.
Yeah.
Right. So we had a question that Ems says every time she trains, whether it be cardio or weight training, her weight loss stalls or she gains weight. She's confused about that. I answered that if she's not giving it enough time, that the initial increase in weight and water retention can be confusing. Do you have a better answer?
No, that's absolutely correct. So like, especially with larger muscle groups like legs, I'll inevitably be up a couple pounds the day after training legs. Like I did squats today. I'll guarantee I'll weigh more tomorrow. Training is a stressor on the body. It's going to cause some temporary inflammation and water retention, but it's a good stressor. It's going to have a hormetic effect, in which case your body adapts to that and improves gradually over time. But initially, a slight increase in scale weight is totally to be expected and normal.
Okay. So ultimately, if you're tracking what you're eating and you're working out, that the working out just long term, I just never see that being the wrong thing to do.
No. Like I would never recommend people look at working out as just this temporary thing to reach a goal and then get rid of. Like you don't have to weight train inevitably your whole life. Like find something that you enjoy doing that pushes the body and is some form of exercise. Like it doesn't have to be, competitive bodybuilding. That's just what I've chosen. But like I've got clients that do jujitsu. I've got clients that do rock climbing. I've got clients that do kayaking. Like find something that resonates with you and just do that.
Got it. Someone had asked, what do you think about exogenous ketones?
All right. Roll up my sleeves here. So it depends what you're trying to do. There's definitely a place for them, especially if you have like some of the science and the research coming out from like a brain neurological standpoint. Like if you have Alzheimer's, dementia, supplementing with exogenous ketones is shown to be beneficial there. But using it to lose weight is not a wise move, because I feel like it's similar to taking steroids. Not that you're going to have the same effect, but from a physiological standpoint, if you are taking steroids and you're injecting a bunch of exogenous hormones and testosterone into your body, then your body's natural production of testosterone decreases, because your body's smart. It sees that we have a bunch coming in. There's no sense for us to continue to produce at the rate that we are. Let's down-regulate our internal production. In fact, the same physiological function happens in the context of exogenous ketones. Like if you're introducing a ton of exogenous ketones, then why would your body be motivated to create a bunch endogenously? Right. when losing fat is my primary objective, I don't use exogenous ketones. If I'm in a maintenance or a surplus or a building phase, then yeah, I'll take some in for a couple of reasons. One, because when I'm in a building phase, my protein is higher, which typically means that I don't feel quite as sharp because my ketone production is a little bit lower. So if I'm not trying to lose fat, then I'll go ahead and have exogenous ketones. And then it does have an anti-inflammatory effect as well, so it could help with my recovery and my training frequency in a building phase. But I definitely would not recommend it if your primary goal is losing body fat.
Yeah. I mean, it's also, there's the whole oxidative priority concept, which is basically your body is going to use, it's like alcohol first, exogenous ketone second, so it kind of, your body has to use these things up before it's going to dive in and use some of your body fat. And so I've always said the thing that's helpful for body fat loss is that you're transforming your body fat into ketones, not simply the presence of the ketones themselves.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. So Wanda asked what you think about meat acidity. There's this concept that red meat is acidic and will cause the higher risk of cancers in the body. I'm going to say, Wanda, I think it's a bunch of hooey. But I'll let Robert answer that one as well.
Well, all I got to say is if that's the case, then I am out of luck. I'm going to have cancer probably relatively soon because I ate a lot of red meat. But yeah, I'm not really worried about the acidity of red meat.
Yeah, there's somebody that just came into the marketplace on keto that's selling a sort of the whole acid alkaline situation. And I have serious doubts about some of that situation. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like you look at how much acid is in your stomach just naturally. Like There's so much more acid in your stomach than is ever going to be present in any type of meat that you're eating. Your body has a pretty good regulation system in place of acid and bases and making sure that everything is at the proper pH. So I wouldn't there may be some, profound information that comes out that I'm not yet privy to, but I don't think that you should just lose sleep over the acidity of red meat.
Right. And really longitudinal studies have not shown. So there's a problem with a health halo effect that they do find some people who eat a lot of red meat have more cancers, but they also find those people are more likely to smoke, drink alcohol, not exercise. Right. So there's nothing that's ever pulled those factors apart and actually analyzed them. And even the links that seem to exist are really tenuous.
Yeah, I think all the clinical studies showing that red meat causes cancer in the context of people that are also eating high carbs too, like it's red meat and carbs.
Right. Red meat and carbs and a cigarette.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you might have cancer then. Okay. Paulette says, if I'm interested in helping and getting someone to help me with macros, etc., well, you can talk to me or Robert. What do you all guys offer at KetoSavage consultations?
So I do consultations. I do macro adjustments. I have clients. I'm in the middle of switching my focus to specifically working with contest prep athletes. However, Deeper State Keto is kind of more of our general population business. Okay. And we have coaches there that also, they basically use my same protocol and then they're coaching the general public, not necessarily just competitive athletes.
Got it. So deeper state keto people, if you want to work with Robert's people. Yeah. Okay. So, all right. I think that we've reached the end of our questions. Is there anything you want to mention, tell people about, have people know about?
Honestly, like I've just been, I guess, frustrated with the people in the keto space lack of stick-to-itness, if that's a good way to put it.
Okay.
Like people will really find the benefit in this nutritional lifestyle if they give it the time it needs and deserves. Like so many people are looking for a quick fix. I mean, how many versions of keto are there right now? Like when I first came in and you first came in, it was keto is keto. Like that's it, the ketogenic diet. Now there's like a million, like Keto AF is one I just heard of today. Like there's a million of them now. Give it the time it needs. Allow yourself to truly adapt. Don't constantly be looking and having this grass is green on the other side, philosophy. You don't need carbs. You don't need TKD. You don't need CKD. Just dial in and optimize with what's been proven to be effective, which is a well-formulated, strict ketogenic diet. Right.
And then from there, we'll all be somewhat bio-individual and we'll need to make some tweaks. But you also get a new car and you move. Like we make tweaks to all parts of our life over time to make it work better for us. And the same would be said of your food choices.
100%. Like I don't ever want to be seen as dogmatic in the keto space,
right?
But I'm constantly doing experiments on myself. I'm constantly changing ratios and calories. And like, that is by all means fair game, but don't feel like you have to totally reinvent the wheel and do like carb ups one week and not the next week and all this crazy chaos. Like self-experiment, find your individual, performance benefits, but don't feel like you need to totally stray away from what to work.
Right. Totally. Well, this has been awesome, Robert. Thank you for taking this nice long chat time with us and letting people know more about you and your philosophy, which is just so much more sustainable than one would imagine a contest prep person might be experiencing.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Kim. It's always a pleasure speaking with you. And I believe in this lifestyle, so anything I can do to spread the message, I'm all for it.
All right. Super duper. Give my love to your lovely wife.
I certainly will. Take care.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us on Keto Life Support. If you'd like more, you can join our friendly Facebook group, Keto Life Support. Can't find it? Go to ketolifesupport.com. If you ever want to suggest a topic for discussion, that would be the place to do it. We'd really, really appreciate it if you would go to your podcast app and subscribe, because that's awesome. And what would be super awesome is if you'd be so kind as to write a review for us. Though we would love it if that review was awesome, just writing a review is all we ask. So have a fabulous keto week, and we'll see you next time.